The Truthers begins as a murder mystery, but by the time it reaches its emotional ending, it becomes something much deeper. Rather than asking who committed the crime, the film ultimately asks how easily people can become trapped by the stories they choose to believe. Throughout the movie, both Martin and Ruth become victims of the exact same problem. They become so certain they are right that they stop questioning the evidence in front of them. That idea completely transforms the ending. At the beginning of the film, Ruth's world falls apart after the sudden death of her mother. The circumstances surrounding her death immediately feel suspicious. Even more unsettling is the strange voice message her mother left shortly before she died. Combined with Martin's increasingly obsessive behavior and his belief in elaborate conspiracy theories, Ruth quickly reaches one conclusion. Her father must have murdered her mother. From that point onward, the audience experiences almost every major event through Ruth's perspective. Every clue appears to support her suspicions. Martin behaves unpredictably. His obsession with hidden conspiracies makes him seem unstable. The more Ruth investigates, the more convinced she becomes that her father is hiding something terrible. The film deliberately encourages viewers to think exactly the same way. Because we are seeing events through Ruth's emotional state, Martin constantly appears guilty. However, the closer we get to the truth, the more complicated everything becomes. One of the biggest turning points arrives when Martin tells the police something almost impossible to believe. He suggests that Ruth herself may somehow be responsible for her mother's death. Initially, this sounds like another paranoid accusation from a man who has completely lost touch with reality. Even the police recognize that Martin's growing age and obsession with conspiracy theories have affected his judgment. But during that conversation, they also make an important observation. For fanatics, belief eventually replaces reality. Once someone becomes completely convinced of something, evidence no longer matters. That statement becomes the key to understanding the entire movie. Eventually, the real truth comes to light. Martin did not murder his wife. Despite everything Ruth believed, he was innocent of the crime she spent the entire film trying to prove. However, that does not mean Martin was completely blameless. His conspiracy theories had consumed his life. He became convinced that a pharmaceutical company was hiding missing children and secretly planned to blow up the building in order to expose what he believed was the truth. When his wife discovered what he intended to do, she was devastated. Unable to cope with the emotional weight of watching her husband lose himself, she turned increasingly to alcohol. One night, while heavily intoxicated, she fell inside the bathroom. The injuries from that accident caused her death. In other words, Martin did not physically kill his wife. But his obsession indirectly pushed their family toward tragedy. His inability to separate reality from fantasy destroyed the people closest to him. For Ruth, discovering the truth is emotionally devastating. She realizes that her investigation was never completely objective. Her grief convinced her that her father had to be guilty. Every piece of evidence was interpreted through that assumption. Instead of searching for the truth, she was searching for confirmation. That realization becomes even more painful because of her own actions. Driven by anger and certainty, Ruth had attacked her elderly father while trying to force him into confessing. She believed she was confronting a murderer. Instead, she had become consumed by the very same certainty that had destroyed Martin. The film quietly reveals that father and daughter are much more alike than either of them ever realized. Martin became obsessed with conspiracies. Ruth became obsessed with proving his guilt. Both stopped questioning their own beliefs. Both ignored evidence that challenged their conclusions. In different ways, they both became fanatics. As soon as Ruth understands this, she rushes to reconcile with her father. Unfortunately, time has already run out. Martin continues pursuing the mission created by his conspiracy theories. Together with Berta, he goes ahead with his dangerous plan. The film ultimately confirms that Martin dies before he can ever truly repair his relationship with Ruth. That ending makes the story even more heartbreaking. Neither of them receives the opportunity for genuine closure. Their reconciliation comes too late. After Martin's death, Ruth returns to Berlin carrying a completely different understanding of what has happened. Then comes the movie's final and most important scene. While walking through the city, Ruth notices people discussing Martin. Some refuse to believe he is dead. Others claim he survived and is secretly preparing his next move. The moment shocks Ruth. She now recognizes exactly what is happening. People are creating stories because they are easier to accept than reality. Instead of accepting uncomfortable facts, they choose explanations that fit what they already want to believe. The irony is impossible to ignore. At the beginning of the film, Ruth believed impossible theories about her father because they helped explain her grief. Now she watches strangers doing exactly the same thing with Martin. The cycle continues. That final sequence reveals the movie's central message. The Truthers is not really about conspiracy theories alone. It is about certainty. The danger comes when people stop asking questions and become convinced they already possess every answer. Whether those beliefs involve secret organizations, imagined crimes, or false accusations, the result is always the same. Reality slowly disappears beneath personal conviction. The title itself becomes especially meaningful by the end. Every major character believes they are searching for the truth. Martin believes he is exposing hidden conspiracies. Ruth believes she is uncovering a murder. The people in the final scene believe Martin is still alive. Each group calls themselves truth seekers. Yet almost everyone spends the film rejecting actual evidence whenever it conflicts with what they already believe. Ultimately, The Truthers delivers a heartbreaking psychological thriller with a powerful warning. Grief, fear, and uncertainty can make people desperately search for explanations. Sometimes those explanations are supported by facts. Sometimes they are nothing more than comforting illusions. The film reminds us that truth is rarely determined by confidence alone. It must be supported by evidence. Otherwise, even the most well-intentioned people can become trapped inside stories of their own making, unable to recognize the reality standing directly in front of them.